Hello and welcome to the Real Success Podcast. I'm your host, Candice Mama. First, if you are returning, thank you so much. And if it is your first time, welcome to the Real Success family. I want to start by saying thank you to each and every single one of you who has rated the podcast, shared it, shown us so much love. We absolutely love you, and we love that you are enjoying this podcast as much as we enjoy making it. Today's guest is remarkable. Her name is Elizabeth Ann Walker. She's an NLP coach, a global speaker, and a self-made millionaire with a remarkable life story. So without further ado, here's Elizabeth. Hello, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm very excited to be chatting with you, Candice. I love you. I love how we've gotten to know each other in such a short space of time. And I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Oh, thank you. And I know that coming to sit with us and chat with us today, I mean, you've already had a manic day. So we are so privileged and we are so grateful. So thank you.
You're welcome. It has been a busy day. I'm grateful that it's happening at 8 o'clock at night and not 2 o'clock in the morning, which is often the case when you live in Australia. Everything happens at 2 o'clock in the morning.
It does, right? And I remember I was staying in Sydney for a while, and it was just crazy how catching my family was just no longer a thing. I was just sending out smoke signals. I'm alive. Don't worry.
Yeah, the time difference is interesting.
Exactly. But jumping into it, so you are an NLP practitioner. For people who don't know what NLP is, how would you define it or describe it?
Yeah, so I'm an NLP trainer, and what that is neuro-linguistic programming. So neuro meaning the brain, right? So anything from the brain, the nervous system, and the hormones that surround the nerves in the body is related to neuro. Then we've got linguistics, which is the words that we use, the way we describe our experience, and the way that we connect to what we label reality as. So our reality is how we say it is. If we say we're depressed, then we are. If we say we're happy, then we are. So our words have a big part to play. And then programming is related to the way that we have either been taught programs by our parents or our schooling, or the way that we have accepted programs from our friends, our peers, or from circumstances that have happened to us. So we're looking at how have you been created? How do you have this current model of the world? How have you created that yourself? And then we go and look at, and how's that affecting your nervous system? How's that affecting the way you think and what you believe is possible in life? And what are the words you're using to describe your experience? Because the words themselves can change someone's experience. And if the people who are listening would like to have an experience of that, just say, well, actually, we all know that old experiment, right? Get a jar of rice, cooked rice, and in one jar, put a cup of cooked rice, and in another jar, put the same, from the same batch, another cup of cooked rice. Label one bad and one good. And every day, tell the bad rice it's bad, and every day, love the good rice and tell it how amazing it is. And within about 3 or 4 days, the bad rice will go bad and the good rice will stay good. And so our words have intention and energy behind them. And so the way we create our experience is using those words. And you can even do an experiment where you just say a word that you don't like, repeat it 10 times and notice how you feel in your body. And then say a word that you really like 10 times and notice how that feels in your body. And there's a different feeling, a different energy, and a different intention behind those words. And that intention, which effectively is purpose, right? When we talk about finding our purpose, we're really setting an intention. So those words that we use are how we're setting the intention for our day. So we might say, oh, I'm going to have a great day today. And we will. Or we might say, I hope I have a great day today. And the hoping part presupposes that we think it's possible that we might not. And that will, sure as the sun rises, create something in your day that makes it not completely great. It'll be overall great. It's just little programs like that and little labels. So that's how I would describe it.
Wow. And how did you get into this? How did you get into NLP? And what was the journey that it took for you to get to this point?
So my background is in nursing and medicine. So I lectured in nursing and I lectured in the School of Medicine at Sydney University for 4 years. And I'd experienced some trauma in my life when I was younger. I first got married. I was in an abusive relationship for 13 years, which involved physical, mental, emotional, financial abuse. And I'd gotten out of that relationship. I was lecturing at uni. I was in a new relationship. And I had stepped back into that beautiful feminine energy and being vulnerable with my new partner, and realized that I was almost unable to receive. And so, being lathered in love, I started to create this conflict in my body that led me to having 43 operations in 3 years. And one of those outcomes from one of those operations is that I was left unable to walk and in a wheelchair. So my left leg was completely numb. I had no, like the doctors tried to put little pins and test the nerves, and there was no electrical conductivity through my left leg at all. And I was like, oh my God, I've got this man who loves me. I'm in this great relationship. I think it's phenomenal. And what kind of life am I giving him if I can't even walk? He had to do everything for me, cook, clean, carry me to bed, take me to the toilet, everything. And I felt so guilty, and I just decided one day to stop eating. I thought, well, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to put him through that. So maybe if I just don't eat, I'll die, and he'll accept that I was sick and I died, and that will be okay for him. And it won't be like suicide. I just, got sick. And he noticed on about the third day that I wasn't eating. So prior to that, I'd sort of hidden a bit of the food and mushed it around on the plate. But on the third day, he came and he knelt down by the bed and he burst into tears and he said, I love you so much, and I'm not giving up, and I need you to not give up. And I want you to do something, anything. And literally, as he was talking to me, my best friend at the time sent me a message and said, I'm going to Tony Robbins UPW. My friend's got a ticket. Do you want to come? It's $1,000. And I looked at it and I just burst into tears, and I was like, I would really love to go, but we don't have $1,000. I can't afford to do something like that. I'll just buy a book, or I'll do something. And my husband said, I don't care. He wasn't my husband then. And he said, I don't care. I'm paying it. You're going. And I went, okay. And I started to get really nervous about it. And I was like, why am I feeling this nervous? And I had no idea about personal development other than, books that I'd read. And I'd grown up through the spiritual community. So I knew about all the woo-woo, but I didn't really know about personal development. And so eventually I got to Tony Robbins, and of course I was disabled. So you get wheeled in first. And it was in Sydney on a flat floor. So it wasn't in a stadium. There was just 6,000 people on a flat floor. And I got a comfy chair. Everyone else got these horrible plastic chairs, but being disabled, I got a comfortable chair, which was a bit of a bonus. But then everyone started dancing. I was like, oh, I can't stand up. I was like, oh, this is stupid. Anyway, eventually some of the helpers sort of helped me stand up a bit and danced a bit and felt good. And then there was this firewalk thing, and I was like, well, I can't do a firewalk. I can't walk. But I did all the things because I was like, well, I'm going to experience it. They say you've got to experience it. And next minute I know I'm kind of being pushed towards the fire lane, thinking my wheelchair's got rubber wheels. I'm not going to be able to take my wheelchair over the fire. It's going to melt. What am I going to do? Anyway, by then you're in this mindset of I can walk on fire, I can do anything. Anything is available to me right now. I got pushed up to the fire lane. I stood up out of the chair with help from 2 assistants, and I walked across the fire by myself without them holding me. And I got to the end and I wiped my feet on the wet grass, and I turned around and went, oh my God, I just walked. What is this magic? Huh? So I'm still in the spiritual thing, like, what magic is this? Where do I learn this? What mystery school do I go to find this out? Right? And I didn't go back in the wheelchair. My husband picked me up and he's like, oh my God, what? Like, and I'm like, don't need it, don't want it, it's never coming back in my life. I'm better. It's like, but what if? And I'm like, no, I'm better. And then I realized that what Tony was using was NLP, a very modified version of it, his own version, his own thing. But I was like, okay, I need to know about this. This is now a need. It's no longer a want, I need it. And so I went along to an NLP practitioner course and became a coach straight after it and did really well. I had like 2 and 3 clients between prac, and like 3 weeks later, I'd signed up to the master practitioner course. And after that was 2 weeks, and I was like, I broke through a board, and I was like, that was even more impressive than the firewalk for me, because how the hell can my hand go through this thick wooden board? And then I started coaching, and I made $35,000 in 6 weeks after MasterPrac. And at the time, working as a nurse and a lecturer, that was almost half a year's wage. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm actually good at this. And it wasn't about the money, it was about the impact. Like people who'd say, you know, there'd been marriages saved, there'd been people who had got out of domestic violence relationships, there'd been children who'd stopped using drugs, there'd been like this massive impact, and I could make money. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to do this. So then I got serious, and I still wanted to just be a coach at that point. I didn't want to be a trainer. And then I met a friend who was like, oh, I'm going to be a trainer. And I kind of looked at her and thought, you don't really strike me as a trainer. And then I was like, oh, perception is projection, like all these rules of NLP. Oh, you know, how is this my reflection? What am I not seeing here? And I thought, oh, maybe I'll be a trainer too. So it was just kind of a random thought. And I went and became a trainer. And on that pathway had developed a partnership. The partnership broke down, like a business partnership. It broke down 3 weeks before our first training. And so that half of the content was taken away from me. So I had 3 weeks to write half the content, and I did it. And we pulled off a kick-ass first training, and it was so great. And then I was like, oh, wow, I'm good at this. And the impact. And we didn't make much money from that first one, because that had all kind of got split up in the partnership breakdown. And it was like, wow, I'm going to actually do this. And then I just kept going. And I just kept going and kept going and kept going. And now I'm Australia's leading integrated NLP trainer. I've got a team of 10 coaches that work for us. We have, you know, in terms of impact, we've impacted hundreds of thousands of people now. Thank you to the impact that we've created through Real Success as well, because that's, you know, pushed us globally. And it's just been an incredible journey. And what's really cool about today, and the fact that we're doing this today, is that right before I came onto this interview, I've just been with a family, and I still do this every now and then. You know, I'm a $1 million business owner now, and I still do these little passion projects every now and then. And a lady recently rang me, and she'd experienced a lot of damaging stuff in her marriage, and some of it was her fault, some of it was his fault. The kids who were older were stuck in the middle but didn't know what to do. And I said to her, she's like, the psychologist won't do a mediation, we need a family mediation. And I said, well, I'll come and do it. How much is it? No, I'll just do it. And so for the 2 hours before I got here, I've been with a family, and the biggest learning I've had through this whole journey is that love is my highest value. And when you can sit with a family who've experienced great trauma within and externally, and they can come back to a place where love is the key, and you can see a husband and a wife burst into tears when they connect again. I got in the car after, and I'm like, I'll get teary now. I'm like, this is what I live for. It's not the money. It's not the big global name. It is the impact that you have at a local level on a family. And when people ask me, for what purpose? Why do I do this? That's why I do it. I do it so that things can be restored to the natural order, so that men and women fulfill their natural roles, so that children are safe and get to grow up in a family that respects them, dignifies them, and creates a safe environment for them to grow into whoever their potential soul journey is. So there's still that little bit of spiritual that weaves through that story.
Oh, wow. I mean, what a story and what a journey, right? Like, what a journey to get to where you are right now. And being a self-made millionaire and being so empowered and then empowering others. And there's so many of our listeners, Elizabeth, who are finding themselves in a place where they are still in the trauma cycle. They are still in that pain cycle, right? And I think for them, what they want to know is like, how did you manage to get out of your first, like, relationship that really, really almost destroyed you?
Yeah. So for me, I'll give you a bit more of that story. So I got married when I was 22. So I was quite young, and I was madly in love, but I was in love with the idea of getting married. And I was in love with the idea of having babies. And I was in love with the idea of being a mom. I was not in love with my husband. And it took me 13 years to realize that. And it's easy to say on reflection, right? But at the time, I said I loved him. It felt like love. I thought it was love. And after about a year of marriage, things started to get tense. And then it was when we had the kids that things started to really break down. And eventually, we moved to an island. I got sick of all the yelling and the screaming and the not helping me with the kids. And it got to a point where he actually just stopped working. And my kids were still going to daycare because he couldn't and wouldn't look after the kids. And so I was working, sending the kids to daycare as he was sitting at home doing nothing. And I was like, can't handle this. So I went looking for other ways to fix it. And I was like, well, what if we move to an island where there's no stress and we become the nurse? He was a nurse as well. So I'm like, what if we become the nurses on the island? And then there's no stress, there's no traffic, there's no need for daycare. Like, it'll all be beautiful, I'm always an idealist. Move to a tropical island, fix all your problems. Of course, this was all before NLP. And at the time, it seemed like a great idea. He was on board. And at this point in time, he'd had 12 affairs that I knew of. And I'd forgiven them all. Because in my mind and my way of thinking, I'd promised until death do us part, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, etc., etc. And I'd made a promise, and my promise, my word was everything. And so I stayed. And it kind of got to the point where I didn't even know if it was going to work or if we were going to end up okay, but I was willing to take the risk. So I found out how to homeschool my children. I made all the arrangements, I organized everything, and we moved to this island. And the island was an island holiday destination of a big holiday company in the world. And it was fun. It meant that it was a total playground for him to continue having more affairs. And but what it did do is I learned how to do flying trapeze, because on the days I worked, he didn't work, and on the days he worked, I didn't work. And so I dedicated myself to a physical pursuit, and I learned how to do flying trapeze. And I'd always wanted to be in the circus, and I thought it was great. And I was like, I suddenly had friends, and this was the first time I realized how controlled I had been. I suddenly had friends that weren't his friends. I suddenly had people who cared about me, irrespective of what was happening for him. And so one of my first tips, if you're thinking that you need support, get some new friends. Create a new environment where you hang around people who are positive and uplifting, and they're your friends. So that's number one. Over time, the affairs got worse and worse, and then the abuse got worse and worse, and money was hidden, stolen, everything was put in the safe combination was changed, I had no access to anything, and I ended up stranded on the island with no way of getting off, because the only way off was on a boat, and you needed identification to get on the boat. So the punishments got worse and worse, and eventually I rang his parents and asked for help. And their solution was to send the children home to them. And I said, well, I'm not sending my children anywhere. My children stay with me. Wherever I go, the children go. And eventually I rang my parents, absolutely ashamed of what I had to tell them, of who I had become, of the person, that I was no longer. And they, pleaded with me to leave. I said, I can't leave. And then they went about creating stuff so that the police got involved. And then I spoke to the police. And one day my husband went off island. He went on a boat over to the mainland. And I got a phone call and it said, be ready in half an hour. We'll be there in half an hour. We've got a chopper. You can take your 2 children and a 5-kilo bag. And I was like, what do you pack? What do you pack when you've got 5 kilos and you've got your whole life? So I packed all the kids' drawings and all of their little things that they made and all of their precious toys because I didn't know what to take. Do you know the thing I regret the most? I left behind a really nice swimming costume, and it sounds so trivial now, but at the time, in order to deflect my real feelings, I was just so angry that I'd left my swimming costume behind. So silly, but that's how we dissociate from feelings, right? So I got on this helicopter, and as soon as we took off, my whole body just went, I've done it. I've done it. There's no going back now. I've done it and I'm safe. And when we arrived on the mainland, there was 3 police cars and they split me and my 2 children up. And unbeknownst to me, my husband's surname in the area that we were, where the island was, on the mainland there, that surname was involved in a lot of crime. And so they were expecting me to be murdered for leaving. And so we went into full police protection. All of this big stuff happened, which was really scary for me. So I went from having this total relaxation moment on the chopper to, oh, I'm back in fight and flight again because all this stuff's happening. I don't know why it's happening. I don't think he's going to kill me, but if you think he's going to kill me, maybe he is going to kill me. I don't know. And it was very scary. And eventually I got home to my mum and dad. So after all the police stuff was done, I eventually went back to my mum and dad's, and they lived on a beautiful property in the Northern Rivers in Australia, which is, well, that picture there is kind of like a scene, but it's a lot greener in real life. And I learned how to receive and how to relax. And after about 3 weeks, my mum said, wow, it's good to have you back. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I can finally see you again. I haven't been able to see you for years. I was like, wow, why didn't you say something to me? Like, I didn't know. Why didn't you say? And so the second tip is when there's an opportunity, take it. So surround yourself with the right people. When there's an opportunity, take it, because stepping onto that chopper was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because it was making a final decision. It was like, yep, I'm taking my kids and I'm going. And then, of course, the legal battle started, the court cases started, and the court order from the first interim hearing was that I got custody of the children. And my lawyer rang me after that order, once I'd got home and I was, home safely and everything. And he rang me and he said, so you won today and I want you to give your ex-husband half custody. And I went, are you crazy? Like, what? And he goes, he's never hurt your children. I said, no, not physically, no. And he said, give him half custody and let him hang himself with his own rope. And I went, I didn't understand, but my dad was encouraging. And so we got to this point where we did half-half, just for the interim order. And of course, he hung himself, right? He didn't take them to swimming lessons. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. He didn't feed them. They were cranky at school. And what that meant, so here's the third bit. When you find someone who you invest in, trust them. You decide to invest in someone, which I did with a lawyer, but many people do with a coach, or they jump on one of the programs that Real Success offers. When you invest money, trust the process. And so I trusted it, and that led to me getting a larger chunk of custody than what would be normal in Australia, because we had proof that it wasn't going to work, right? And then that all, was a bit dramatic for about 8 years after that. He felt that he was hard done by, my ex-husband. I just got on with my life, but the kids were still having to go every now and then to their dad, and that was disruptive. And eventually my eldest son, when he was about 15, he became a drug addict. And so then I blamed myself. Oh, I should never have left. If I had have just been strong enough to put up with the abuse, that wouldn't have happened. I could have saved my child. And I went back through that guilt again. And that was around the time I met my husband, hence all the body things going wrong, because I was just harboring so much guilt. So do the healing, even if you think you've healed. So do the work is the next point, right? You think you've healed, just do the work. The best bit about this story is that last year, when COVID first set in, I had a message from my ex-husband. So we're now talking 11 years down the track. And he said, hey, I can see what you've done with Jack, which is my eldest son. So by then, my eldest son had done a lot of spiritual work and had freed himself from addiction. And I'm pleased to say now he's a great breathwork practitioner and a coach himself. He's 21 and he runs a great business and it's amazing. And after my ex saw that, and we often talk about generational trauma being healed at the younger generation, right? So my son healed, and then my ex-husband messaged me and said, hey, I've seen what you've done with Jack, and I've been watching your journey on social media through a fake account. And I really want to talk to you. And I was like, okay, well, I'll talk to you. And I got on a Zoom and he asked me to coach him. So I charged him a lot. So if I'm doing this, you're paying. And I coached him for the beginning of last year. And it was an incredibly liberating experience. It was quite beautiful. I love him that he's the father of my children. I've always been able to say that, even in the deepest trauma, I've been able to say that. And he now, only just, even with the coaching, he's only just now really entering that self-love exploration of how he can get himself back. And for me, that's been like the whole cycle. And that coincided with the first year that we created $1 million in our business. So we did it last year. We've done it again this year into our financial year's end in June. And for me, the biggest impact of that was seeing the cycle complete. It's like the end of the cycle, and it was so liberating. So trust the people you invest in. Surround yourself with great people. Stick to your decisions. Those are the big key points of how you honor yourself, really. And I think the thing that was lucky for me is I did have a great upbringing. I had great parents. I don't come from that hard luck story of childhood. And so I had an innate gift inside me of self-love. However, after working in this industry for 5 years now, everyone has that. They just don't realize. It exists. That's what makes people keep seeking. It's where the fire comes from to go, like, this can't be it. There must be more. It's that fire that won't go out, and they keep going and going. And it's exciting to me when I see someone who is broken but still showing up. When I see someone who feels like the world's ending, but they're still reading a book. They're saying in the chat on a Real Success Summit, I want it, but I don't know if I can afford it, but they're still there and they're listening. And that excites me because that's the fire getting fuel. And when that fire is allowed to burn, the passion starts to grow and you start to get the real version of you back. And all the brokenness just slowly melts away. And I often tell the story of the Golden Buddha. And the Golden Buddha was so precious that it got buried under the ground for thousands of years. And one day a new monk came along and he'd heard the legend of the Golden Buddha. And he started digging, and he pulled off the rubble and the mud and the dirt and the grit and the years of shame and poverty and problems that had been experienced in that town, and once again found the golden Buddha and restored it to its beauty. And I love that metaphor for how we get to change and grow, and that we all are the golden Buddha that resides inside of us all the time. That fire is always there.
Jeez. There's just certain stories that you listen to, and it honestly sounds like it could have been scripted in a Hollywood movie, right? Because you think, how does one individual go through that much and still come out on the other end? And then it still has such a incredible and inspiring, and I mean, there are really no words for what has just happened with your ex-husband, and and where you find yourself now, and where you found yourself with your health, and where it is now, and your son, and where he is now. It's so beautiful. And you spoke and touched on self-love. In that entire journey, you were saying, you always had that love within yourself. You always had that self-love somewhere buried. How did you start to find it? What was that process like for you to really start unveiling that self-love and living within it?
Yeah. So it was slow at first, much like a fire. And that's why I liken it to a fire. Because when you first start a fire, there's just a little flame, right? And the piece of paper or the fuel or whatever you use to start it sort of burns down, and you hope that the stick catches alight. And it's much the same, I think, when you restart that journey of self-love, is you throw something on the fire, you hope that it catches alight. And when it doesn't, often we tell the story of, oh, nothing works, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I can't do it. But you still muster up the courage to throw on another match, and then throw on another match. And it's tenacity. Tenacity is what brings self-love. It's that discipline. It's the willingness to keep going, because it can take a few months, a few years, a decade. It depends on who you are and who the people around you are as well as your environment. And so the self-love journey for me, like I said, I came through the spiritual line. So for me, it started with things like, oh, I'm going to go and learn massage, and then I'll go and learn, aromatherapy. And after I was at my parents' house, after I'd left on the helicopter, the first thing I did after about 2 weeks, I was like, I'd lived on this island with friends who were young, and I did trapeze, and we were constantly touching each other. Like, you catch someone like this and swing through the air, and there was constant physical touch. And after a few weeks at Mum's, I was like, I need to go and have a massage or something, Mum. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I'm craving touch. Because whilst my parents are super loving, they've never been really huggy people, and I'm naturally a touchy person. And so I went and had a massage, and that massage, I bawled my eyes out. And that for me was the first stick that caught a light. I did something that allowed me to release and allowed me to become someone who was capable of receiving. And I don't think you need to have money to pay for that either, by the way. I think there are, therapists that work for small amounts of money that are willing. And there's also a process, I know there's a process called havening, where you do this and you just self-touch, and it feels like someone else because your arms are crossed, your brain gets a bit confused. And that first thing was just that touch was so important. Now for other people, it might be a different process in the beginning, but for me it was touch. And then the next thing that happened was I'd been just feeling really tired, and I had no energy. And of course I'd been in an abusive relationship for 13 years, but I'd always been a high achiever before that. So as a young child, I was an Australian champion in ballroom dancing and trampolining, and so I'd been a high achiever. And so having no energy wasn't okay for me. I didn't even care that I'd been through this big trauma. I still expected to have energy. And so the next thing I did was I went to a naturopath, and I got this herb thing made up to give me energy, and it tasted awful. Like, I don't know if you've ever had herbs, but it was just disgusting. And but I took it religiously every day. So the second piece, rather than touch, was discipline. It was, I'm going to do this for me every day. I don't like it, but I know it's good for me. And so I'm going to do it every day. And I think that sort of paradox of I don't like it, but it is good for me. If you can hold that for long enough, then you can start to find things that you want to do for yourself and that you do enjoy doing. So having little kids, there was a lot of time that I spent investing in them. And sometimes the self-love thing would start to go down. But what was interesting was it was almost as if the plants or the herbs in that first tincture would remind me by giving me a signal of tiredness, a year later, of like, hey, this tired is a sign you need to actually look after yourself. And I listened. So every time my body did that, I'd be like, okay, what do I need to do today? And it might have been as simple as having a bath, doing a cleansing routine on your face. Like, these are the basic things. Now, remember, at this point, I've still not done the work, but naturally I'm following the rhythm of nature. I'm following what my body's telling me. I'm following what the plants are telling me. I'm following that natural rhythm that exists in the world and flowing with it rather than fighting against it. And so then I started to do some more personal development stuff, which for me at that point was still spiritual. So aromatherapy, I learned how to do massage, I learned how to do naturopathy. I studied, I'm a bit of a study nerd. And I'd heard about personal development. I'd heard of Jack Canfield, I'd heard of Tony Robbins, I'd heard of Dr. John DeMartini, but it didn't really mean much to me at that point. And like I said, then I had that opportunity after I'd been so sick and had so many operations to be in a room with Tony. And at the end of that first UPW that I went to, I set a goal, and the goal was to speak on stage with him. And I didn't think I'd get there. So there's the next tip on self-love. Set goals that are achievable, and set goals that are not, that you think are not achievable, and still work to get them. And I did the work, and it actually called the way that I ended up sandwiched on a summit between Tony Robbins and John DeMartini, who were the first people I'd heard of in this industry, was because I'd invested in myself. And I know that a lot of Real Success viewers will know Kate Gray. So Kate Gray and I went along to a Gary V summit together, and we both invested a lot of money to spend 3 days with him, not really knowing how he was going to affect our businesses at the time, because we were both still very much in a spiritual space. And then a few years later, I actually hired Kate as my coach. And I hired her as my coach because I didn't like her at the time. And I thought, well, she's bound to have different stuff to me. And so that's a good reason to hire her, because she'll have a different viewpoint. And I fell in love with her. And that was through COVID. And we started COVID because we put a lot of money into the business with $5,000 in our account. We paid out all our rooms for the year at the beginning of the year. And then we couldn't run anything because of COVID. And it was at the beginning of 2020 when Kate put my name forward to Real Success. And so the very first summit, I think it was halfway through, maybe June. So the very first summit I did, which was November, and I thought, oh, it's going to be a women's event. It'll be something, you know, that I'm good at and I know how to speak on. And then I got the phone call with the, you know, this is what we do and this is how it works. And I'm like, oh, I said, who else is speaking on this? And then the first two names I say is Tony Robbins, John DeMartini, and I was sitting in the car on the Zoom going, I'm like, oh! How did this happen? But it was the constant investment in self, the constant doing the self-love, the constant work that I put into myself, and the willingness to keep going got me that goal. And the funny thing about goals is when you set them, it's never about the goal. It's always about the person you become on the way. And so I did that summit, and I thought I was going to feel amazing the next day, but the next day I just woke up and went, oh, I need a new goal. I felt amazing at the time. I was so excited, and all my friends are like in the house and they're like, oh my God. And then I was like, oh, it's a new day. I need a new goal. I've achieved all my big goals. How exciting. I need a new one. And from that point on, the goal has just been impact. So up until that point, there were very definite goals. There were very definite financial goals. But since then, it's been just impact. How many people? How far can we get this reach? How many people can we get connected back to their natural order in their heart? How many people does it take before the world has a quantum shift? And you can feel it. There's this is the idealism of an entrepreneur, right? There's this, I can feel it. It's going to happen in my lifetime. And I truly believe in that. I believe that there are enough people who are heart-centered and coming from a space of love and who are doing the work in all its forms, because there's no one form of personal development that's better than another. It's all great. And I really believe that we can have a different world.
Oh, I love it.
I go down rabbit holes. I have no idea what the question was. It's how I work.
No, you did great. You did great. We were talking about self-love, and I think that is a perfect way to actually talk about it, because as you said, you were talking about goals and how you actually develop that relationship with self. And, I think for me, now that you're at this point, and this is also a question I gave to the hip hop preacher. He was also someone I interviewed. And I was asking him, once you attain goals, right? Because sometimes we don't actually get to the point where we speak about like, okay, now, Elizabeth, I got everything I wanted, and now I just feel like a fraud.
Yeah, that's so real.
Right. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with imposter syndrome?
So that happened big time for me after that time when I spoke, because it was like, oh, I did it. And then there was the thought of, it wasn't really that hard. Like, it only took 3.5 years. It wasn't really that hard. I didn't have to beg for it. I kind of got offered it. Do I really deserve that? And it was interesting because this was another revolution, right? So they often say different levels, same devil. And I was like, oh, that's the I'm not good enough thing creeping in again. Haven't seen that for at least a couple of years. Where did that come from? And it was, well, only a few people bought my thing on the first time I spoke with Real Success. And I didn't have any other stick to measure myself by. And one of the things I remember a teacher speaking to me about at one point through my journey is ask for what you want. And so I messaged the beautiful Lisa and I said, hey, how did that go? And it was nerve-wracking. It was so nerve-wracking because it was like, oh my God, man, like I'm supposed to be this big personal development guru now, leading Australian NLP trainer, like, and here I am feeling not good enough, and I'm asking for praise and feedback. And I sat with this message and didn't push send for quite a while. And then I was like, you know what? This is ridiculous. It's okay to ask for what you want, and it's okay to ask for feedback, and it's okay to accept praise, and it's okay to receive. And it's okay to receive criticism too, if it's what you need. And if it's what's going to grow you, and if it's what's going to create bigger impact in the world. And so I asked, and I got back a great response. And it's always been like that. And like I said, I come from here, and it's about the relationships that are built. Sometimes the only way to measure is with money, impact, drivers that seem so external. But when you connect and you ask for communication, which is what NLP is really all about, is you actually get what you want and what you need. And when that feeling is present, because even people who tend to not function too much on the feeling scale, they still have feelings. And when that feeling's present, that's what drives you forward to the next goal. It's a feeling of accomplishment. And you know that saying that purpose is found in the work. And there's that great speech about the man in the arena by Teddy Roosevelt. And You know, it's a man whose face is marred with dirt and grit of the work that he's done. And for me, that's the intention. The intention is to get people back into their heart space, to return the natural order. And if that's my intention, then my purpose is clear.
I love it. And I love what you said. And I love the vulnerability, because I think there is, you know, you do reach these moments in life. And I know I've had so many in my career whereby I'd be like, I'd get some great accomplishment or recognition or something. And I'd be like, wait, I didn't work hard to get this. So if I didn't put in all this hard work, sweat, tears, then why are they giving it to me?
Yeah, it's like that's just the societal program, right? The program is money doesn't grow on trees. Everything has to, you know, a hard day's work is what you need to do. And in my experience, in the last 2 years in particular, money grows on every tree. And the only money trees that grow money, because all trees are capable of growing money, the only trees that grow money are the ones that are nurtured.
Oof.
The more people you nurture, money is just a byproduct, it's just an energy. The more people you nurture, create, care for, work with, everything else just flows. It's actually easy. And people maybe don't want to hear that. There might be some people who are thinking it's not easy, you don't know how hard it's been. Well, yeah, I do. I was a single mom for 7 years.
Yeah.
I had times where I had to ask people to give me food for my kids. And that the shame in doing that, when I'd come from a decent family, when I had a decent job, the shame of having to ask for food from people was incredible. So I do know what it's like. I've been there, I've done it, and I've also kept going. And I also didn't give up. And I also didn't fall into the drama triangle and play the victim. I used vulnerability, I used my heart to keep me going.
Sure. And I think that is exactly the core of it. I think, you know, the relationship we build with ourselves, when we start really being firstly very truthful and honest with ourselves, and then start really nurturing and loving ourselves and giving ourselves the validation that we need, that we assume others should give us, or the career we do, or whatever it is. Because the truth is, like, I used to be that person. I used to think to myself, oh, once, you know, I get this accolade or this or that, then I'm gonna be a cool person. People are gonna think I'm so cool, Elizabeth. Yeah. And then I remember I got like Vogue Paris, and I was like top 33 most inspiring woman or something. And I remember just being like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is the moment I've been waiting for. And then, much like what happened with you, the next day after the summit, I was like, okay, this was not exactly what I thought it would be. But it all went back to inside, right? The work we do with ourselves. That's the most important work we'll ever do.
And some people are internal and some people are external. And if you're an external person, then ask for what you need. If you're an internal person, you'll already know. And it's just that, you know what? No one else can fill your cup. You fill your own cup first. And there's another story I tell about, imagine you're a bucket in the middle of a lake, and everyone you love and care about is on the edge of the lake. How are you going to reach them? You're a bucket. And the only way is to allow the rain to fill you up so that you overflow and create ripples on the lake, and it spreads out to the edges and hits the people you love. So you fill your own bucket first.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, we spoke about very briefly as we're coming to the end, we spoke about the fact that you are currently involved in a very cool project. So cool. You are going to be writing a book alongside some really amazing people. Do you want to tell us a little about that?
I am. We are rewriting we're doing a new version of Think and Grow Rich, which was written by Napoleon Hill, which I think everyone in personal development is familiar with. And the way we're doing it is we're writing a chapter each on each chapter. So it's going to be a 13-volume series. So there's 13 books all in total. And we each write a chapter in each book. And I'm working on this project with people like Eric Swanston, with Sharon Lepter, with John Assaraf and Lauren Langmeyer. some incredible people who is another opportunity that just kind of came to me. And I know Sharon through Real Success, but it didn't come via Sharon. It actually came from jumping on Clubhouse. So here's another tip if you want to be successful. Jump onto the new things, even if you don't know how they work. Because sometimes they're the places that you form the relationships that have the most impact in your life. And when I think about this book being launched and all the countries that it's going to be launched in, that's impact, that's more people, and that's more changing the world. And the more people that read it and see the different perspectives. And, you know, I did have a thought at one point, like, does anyone want to know about this stuff that's happened to me? Like, I write one of the chapters I talk about, in the chapter of desire, I talk about a ring that I really wanted and I finally got, and then I lost it, and how my desire kept me hunting for this ring. And I thought at the end of writing the chapter, I was like, dude, does anyone even care about my ring? Like, how I felt about the ring. But the thing is what may seem normal to us, and this I say to everybody, what may seem normal to you may be the most inspiring thing someone hears all day. And you never know what you're going to say that's going to inspire someone to change their life, repair a relationship, create something new. And so choose your words carefully with freedom of expression.
Wow. I mean, for me, as you're speaking, you were speaking about Clubhouse. And the first thing that came to my mind is the fact that you are living your life in divine inspiration. And how I define divine inspiration is when you are in alignment with the flow of the universe and the flow of your life, what I believe happens is you have these, what we call random thoughts, these feelings, these nudges that let you do something that is so out of like your wheelhouse, or something that you'd never normally do. Like for you, it was going on Clubhouse that day. For me, it could have been something completely different. And for the listeners, it's going to be different. But following that intuition, that gets you to this grand place where you're like, if someone had told me that little inkling I had to go to the store would have introduced me to my new husband, or to, you know, jump on Clubhouse and I'd be contributing to this incredible book, I'd have never believed them, right? And I think that's where you are. You're in divine flow.
And that's so true, because we moved states in Australia. We thought we might move. 3 days later, we looked at a house. A week after that, we signed the lease and moved states. And I never went home. I stayed because I had a speaking engagement. My husband went home and packed the house and we moved here. And all of that happened right before COVID. And where we live in Australia, we've had a 1 3-day lockdown, and restaurants closed for 3 weeks right at the beginning. And that's the only real impact it's had on us. And that for me has been one of the biggest things I just trusted. Like, the message was, you need to get out of Sydney, and we did. And I'm so grateful now, because we have had a lot of freedom compared to the rest of the world. And, you know, there are opportunities to trust your gut and follow your intuition all the time. And when you start listening to that, I guess that really is the ultimate form of self-love.
Oof. Elizabeth, I could speak to you all day. But as we close off, what are 2 things, like either 2 life mottos or 2 belief systems that you live your life by?
Inspire yourself. Stop waiting for someone else to inspire you. Stop waiting for someone else to be the driver. Get in the driver's seat and inspire yourself. And run everything through the lens of love. And what I mean by that is, if you're having a fight with your husband or your wife, they're your husband, they're your wife, they love you. Run it through that lens before you respond. It'll save you a million arguments.
Woof. This has been amazing. Thank you.
It's been great.
Thank you so much for spending time with us on the Real Success podcast. It has been a privilege and an honor to have you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Candice. Really appreciate it.
Oh, man. I love how much energy Elizabeth has and how graciously she shares of herself with others. Please, whatever you have taken away from this episode, make sure that you are commenting, sharing, and also letting us know. We love to hear from you. And if you're not a part of the Real Success Club, be sure that you check us out. All the information will be in the show notes below. And if this is where you choose to leave us, it has been an honor spending time with you. And I look forward to seeing you again next week.